Hi, I'm Melanie Phillips, and this is the 20th anniversary reading of my transition diary. At this point, we're in 1989, in August, after the first couple of entries, and there's an author's note in my diary. It reads, Author's Note. There are about 3 weeks missing between the first diary entry and the second. I had no idea at the time that I'd be documenting my transition so fully, and had only written the first entry since I'm a writer by trade and by love. Writing for me has always been a natural way to work out my feelings. Nonetheless, several important events transpired before my entries became regular, so I document them here for clarity. The Saturday following my first doctor's appointment, there was a support group meeting hosted by the fellow who had been recommended by the hormone doctor to me. Mary did not yet know about my recent hormone use, although I told her of my fantasy of being female a year ago, and had even confessed that I had tried hormones briefly. After that, I had grown a mustache to prove to her that I would not follow that direction any further than fantasy, so I elected not to tell her I was on hormones, but tell her only about the support group meeting, and use that as an excuse for having shaved off my mustache. She didn't like my going out dressed as Melanie and refused to see me dressed as a woman, instead taking the kids to a movie so I could get ready in peace. It took me about 3 hours to put myself together in those days, and I needed every minute. I was more nervous than I'd ever been as time drew near, but being summer, it was still light, and I finally left at 6 p.m., sure the neighbors would find me out. The drive was scary, but exhilarating. I'd actually never met another transsexual before and had no content or knowledge of the community, so I had no idea what to expect. The meeting was at a private home in the San Fernando Valley in the midst of a typical suburban neighborhood. I parked my car and gingerly made my way up the walk. I couldn't tell where to enter from. There were several doors. I knocked on one but got no response, and I began to fear that I had the address or the time wrong and that some angry homeowner would leap out with a shotgun and end the adventure right there. Finally, I moved to the alcove and saw a note taped above the door. Welcome, come in. Would there be 5 people there? 50? Would any of them also be dressed? I was wearing the same outlandish outfit I had worn to the doctor's. It was the only one I had. But more important, would they think I was pretty? Well, I was the second one to arrive. The host, Lee, introduced me to the first guest, a middle-aged man named Bill. I was the only one dressed as a woman, and I felt like an absolute fool. Lee urged me to sit anywhere, and I selected a spot on the couch across from them, and they returned to their animated conversation. I felt completely out of place. 3 or 4 other men arrived for the 6:30 pre-meeting class on gender identification, and none of them were dressed either. At this point, I would have left in a flash, except that would have embarrassed me even more. Finally, the class started, and Lee illustrated the differences between anatomical sex, male or female, sexual preference, straight, gay, or bi, and gender identity, masculine or feminine. He explained how none of them were tied together and any combination was possible, and I finally began to understand for the first time just what nature of heart I was, or nature of beast. Well, eyes are going here at age 56. Toward the end of the 90-minute class, other people started to filter into the support group portion of the meeting, and some of them were dressed. Finally, I was not alone. Eventually, about 30 people had arrived. Gays, bis, TVs, pre-op and post-op transsexuals, real transsexuals. I had never been so close. Everyone was warm and friendly, even the truck drivers and the tutus. Well, not really, but that was the impression a couple of them gave. The one thing that impressed me most was that each of these people was friendly, sincere, respectful, and willing to accept anyone for whatever or whoever they were. No ridicule, no recrimination. The format was a round robin, and at my turn, I had my first experience impressing people with who I was. I was nervous to be sure, and my voice was a joke. I kept trying to gesture in a feminine manner, but managed only to look stiff and stilted. Still in all, the group accepted me as one of their own, and I felt like I had come home. Well, afterward, I ended up talking at length with the guest who was there when I arrived, Bill. It turned out that this was his first meeting as well. He was TV, but had never dressed in front of anyone. He was also a writer and asked me if I might like to co-author something with him. I agreed, and we exchanged phone numbers. Later in the week, he called me and invited me to lunch at the Rose City Diner in Pasadena, not far from the route the Tournament of Roses parade, whose official film I had worked on in years past. I arrived with excitement, and as I had never gone to an eating establishment as a woman before, nor had I, as a woman, had lunch with a man. He greeted me outside with a handshake. When we walked through the door, he opened it for me, though. Hey, this was great. He gave his name to the waitress, and it was only a moment before a table opened up. It never occurred to me that the woman is supposed to go first, behind the waitress. You never think about that, or what you don't do. So it wasn't until he indicated that I should walk first that I finally realized I was screwing up already. I then realized that here was my first trip out that wasn't a quick romp, and he had selected the busiest diner in all of Southern California at the peak of lunch hour. The tables were all open, so I would be in full view with nowhere to hide. I looked over the menu and selected the chicken salad as the item least likely to attract attention, and he ordered for me. The young lady will have. Well, we talked for a while, man and woman out for lunch, and then the order arrived, with fanfare. Here was the biggest chicken salad I had ever seen. A tostada shell filled with about a foot high, and every imaginable garnish. The waitress had to strain to carry it. Every eye in the place turned to see who had ordered the monstrosity. So much for anonymity. To this day, I have not been able to order a chicken salad in a restaurant. It still happened 20 years later. Well, I made it through the meal, and actually had a good time. After lunch, we walked up and down the streets of Old Town Pasadena, stopping in shops and talking about his story that we might work on together. We said goodbye with another handshake and went our separate ways. Meanwhile, the hormones began to take effect. As predicted, on the 10th day after my first shot, my nipples began to swell slightly, actually more of a puffiness, and became tender. I've never been able to keep a secret from Mary, so once again I broke down and told her everything. She was upset. Well, openly upset? That'll work. But we did not have an argument. In fact, we discussed the issues rather candidly and calmly, and even arrived at a tentative agreement that would allow us to stay together. The confrontation I had dreaded never really materialized. In fact, it was something of a letdown. I'd almost yearned for, required a major event, just to work, or prove my resolve. Just to mark or prove my resolve. The italics are killing me. But it didn't happen, and that left me feeling somewhat unsettled, almost as if nothing had really happened at all. It was in this state of unfulfilled confusion that I made my next entry.